Jacqui Munro, welcome into the weeds. Thank you very much for being the first Liberal MP onto our august and well-subscribed podcast. Welcome.
Thank you very much. And I don't know if I'm the only Liberal viewer, but I have certainly been enjoying the episodes so far.
Well, I don't think you are. Like the John McGowan podcast went very, very well. It wasn't viral, but it was certainly had a bit of heat about it. And I think it was a lot of people tuned in for that. And that's what we're about. We're about a podcast that's going to talk to a lot of different people about a lot of different things. The key thing being that they are interesting and leaders in whatever field they're working in. And that's what you are, because you are a real trailblazer, a pioneer. You are one of the youngest, if not, I think the youngest woman ever elected to the Legislative Council, or is that?
I'm the youngest Liberal woman ever elected.
The youngest Liberal woman out of many hundreds that have been elected, and the first.
Not hundreds in the upper house, I should say.
Oh, in the upper house.
Yeah.
In the upper house.
Yeah.
But you're the first openly gay Liberal woman elected to the Parliament.
Yes.
In New South Wales.
Although I will also correct you there, I'm a big B.
You're big B.
I'm a B.
Okay.
In the alphabet.
Okay. You're the big B.
Yeah.
A bit from column A and a bit from column B.
That's right.
Okay.
You've got to maximise your chances.
Okay. Well, good. Okay. Well, that's good. That's good. You are operating with 100% of the population there. Well, maybe not 100%, most of. But fantastic. You're a real trailblazer. But look, you're also a real thought leader. You're one of the people in the Liberal Party that they are looking to guide them back into government, to set the philosophical and the policy agenda that's going to make them appealing to the population. You're in opposition. You're the shadow minister for...
Shadow Assistant Minister, which we abbreviate to be the SHAM.
The SHAM.
For the Arts, Innovation, Digital Government and the 24-hour economy.
Well, that sounds very modern indeed.
It's the work hard, play hard set of portfolios.
Oh, very good. Very good.
Yeah.
Well, you certainly are. You are a hard worker.
Thank you.
For a young woman, you have really gone a long way very quickly. You've come a long way. You've come from the Shire. You're from a
not that far.
Not
really.
that far. Well, there's not many people that leave the Shire. It's like the Insular Peninsula and Cronulla, the Sutherland. A lot of people are born there and die there. A beautiful part of the world, and your family's been there for a long time.
Sort of. So my parents moved there from the St. George area, basically. So it wasn't really a long way. And I was born in St. George Hospital. I was the fourth generation to be born in St. George. So we've been in that area for a while. My parents decided to move down to the Sutherland Shire. Very beautiful and bushy. We're on the Warrenora River. It was really quite an idyllic place to grow up. But when I got to high school, where I insisted on going to a co-ed school because I wanted to make sure that I was friends with boys and girls, that I realised I loved the hustle and bustle of the city, and I loved just being a little menace on the streets of Sydney when I was 14 and 15, and I had a boyfriend who lived on Pitt Street and he went to Sydney Grammar, so we got to
You were at a selective school? What school did you go to?
Yeah, Caringbah High School.
Okay.
The same school as Mark Speakman, the leader
there
of the
you go.
opposition. Yep.
Your leader. He's still the leader?
He is most certainly still the leader. And we've just recorded a win in Port Macquarie.
Yes,
so.
we'll get to that.
Yeah.
We'll get to... I saw Mark today. He had the tail up, very happy about that.
Yeah, he was my first ever political boss as well.
Yes, you've had some very influential bosses, but you came up through the Shire. You went to Sydney University. Mm-hmm. You studied international relations and political economy. How come you're not a communist?
Yeah,
I mean, you must have been the only one doing political economy that isn't in the Socialist Alliance.
Frank Stillwell was very disappointed, communist professor. I ran into him a few years
Green's
ago.
economics spokesperson.
Yes. Yeah, I guess I guess the love of the Liberal Party ethos was strong in me from a young age. So I appreciated the introduction to a worldview that was not necessarily my own, but, you know, you get to see how other people think and how they feel. And one of my career options I thought might be to be a diplomat. So getting an understanding of political economy and also international relations were definitely part of that grounding. But also it allowed me a lot of time to do all the extracurricular stuff at uni.
Okay, the Manning bar and getting into trouble.
Yes.
But you're very curious. So you weren't afraid to test your own ideas?
Never.
To be challenged. So you're involved in student politics?
Very much so.
Tell us about that.
So I got involved in heaps of clubs and societies like the Jazz Society and the Drama Society, and I did spend a lot of time at Manning and I made a lot of friends. I became the president of the Arts Faculty Society. I ran O Week in 2010. Like, I was super involved. And for me, that was the fun thing about uni. Like, in a way, you can learn anywhere. Like, your degree can come from anywhere. But the unique thing about Sydney Uni at the time was that it had this amazing, vibrant student life. So I really got involved. And I mean, honestly, the friends that I made there, a lot of them work in Parliament now, whether they're journalists or advisors or other MPs. So it was an amazing network building. But when I got to, after I'd been president of the Arts Faculty Society, there was a move on. The independents were massive. There weren't really political parties directing the student politics of the time in the same way that there can sometimes be. Like, I find it kind of goes in waves. So I ran as an independent, and my slogan, "Let's go Munro," got me through, along with getting the Honi Soit quiz, I think almost 100% right.
Really?
Yeah, and I made sure that when I, like, "Let's go Munro," using my surname was about masculinizing me, because I thought that that might be a little more successful in a political
Good
sense.
alliteration
Thank
too.
you. Yeah, rhyming.
Nice.
Yeah,
Yes.
so yeah, that was a lot of fun, and I got elected and, you know, got involved in SRC as well. But just that opportunity to be a student leader early on was pretty phenomenal. Like, you don't often get that. It has like $21 million turnover at the time. It's a big business, a full student board. So yeah, it was like we were fighting against the university because they wanted to take over all our food and beverage outlets, which was one of the key ways that we had an independent income stream. So there was, you know, it was a real issue. It was a real political fight to make sure that students were at the forefront of delivering student life, and that we were responding and on the ground at the time in the face of the student services amenity fee coming in for the first time, university trying to grab that out, which was traditionally essentially like a union source of income, but because nobody else around the country, no other unis had such a strong union, and a lot of them had been subsumed by university funded SRCs, that we were in this really unique and amazing opportunity to actually ensure that we were independent. And yeah, we fought successfly for that at the time.
And you won.
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
So your first big campaign was as a unionist.
Unbelievably, yes. Although, yeah, it was. There was some interesting alliances on the student union board.
But you built them. You built big networks.
Yeah.
You got a taste for politics. You got a taste for winning.
Yes, certainly.
But you pretty quickly migrated into the Liberal Party.
Yeah, I joined the Liberal Party after that.
You joined the Liberal Party.
Yeah.
But you must have been you're doing international relations. You're studying political economy. You're thinking about things.
Sure.
I've read your inaugural speech, which is a cracker. It's a really interesting journey you've been on. But you've done a deep dive into, you know, classical liberal philosophers, Seneca, all of these things. What was it about liberalism that attracted you?
There are so many things. I don't think it's one thing, but fundamentally it's the respect for the individual. Like, I mean, it's really the core of our human rights system. And we have the opportunity to, in Australia, vote and participate. And even from a young age, like even listening to ABC Radio National on the way to band practice at high school, like there was always a sense that politicians are having conversations about the laws and the rules that literally govern our lives. And to be involved in that is not only a massive privilege, it's a massive amount of power that is exercised. So I always had a sense of respect for that. And I think liberalism captures really effectively the relationship between government and the individual and community. And certainly the Liberal Party, as it was founded by Menzies, was about delivering for individuals and communities, but noting that the best outcome that we should aim for is based around an idea that as much as possible, we shouldn't have to rely on government, that in fact, we should rely on the communities that we build, the relationships that we have with civil society. And I guess like the conservative part of me, if there is such a thing, is based in that respect for institutions. Like I'm not a revolutionary. I'm someone who believes that you've got to take on the responsibility of improving things gradually. And I said this in my inaugural speech, but there's a great quote around where, like, I don't know if you know Slavoj Žižek, but like notorious left wing, pretty niche dude.
What happens after the revolution?
Exactly. What happens the day after the revolution? Like you still have to rely on the relationships that you've built throughout your entire life, the institutions that stand or don't stand. Like there's no wiping the slate clean. So liberalism allows for that consistent discussion and dialogue between people, communities, government, and again, with that fundamental respect for the individual as a person who is should be as free as possible to live a positive and contributive life.
But you're not out to abolish the Department of Education.
No, I'm not a libertarian.
Yes, I know.
Libertarian.
And you can see things tipping over into that area with
Doge.
Doge and Javier Milei in Argentina getting a lot of traction. How do you feel about when you see things like Doge just saying, you know, everyone in the federal government, like Elon Musk saying, you know, justify your position, like this razor going through these institutions and this is a Republican government in the States. How do you feel about that?
Well, I think it's responding to an obvious sense of dissatisfaction and disillusionment that people have. Like it's fair, you know, you can't say that it's unfair. In America, there are people who can't afford to live the life that they want to. They may not be able to give their kids the education that they would like them to have. So when people feel that sense of dissatisfaction and disillusionment and powerlessness, really, there is a natural instinct to want to change things. I don't think that that's a really natural feeling. So it's easy to go to the government. I know the Edelman Trust Barometer, which I always love looking at, the Australian results are coming out tomorrow. So I'm really looking forward to that. But
I've missed that. Walk me through it, the Edelman Trust Barometer.
The Edelman Trust Barometer comes out every year. It would have been going for decades now, I think. And basically it's this massive global survey of the ways that people feel about institutions, whether it's government, business, their local communities, and it charts this really interesting path. Like it's something that governments and politicians should look at because there are results like in the last one, which was the global one was released in January. There's this incredible stat, which is 4 in 10 people feel that something pretty close to violence is an acceptable way to demonstrate your viewpoint if you feel like you're not being listened to otherwise. So there's this real increase in, I think, that backlash against that powerlessness. Like the only thing that I can do if I'm not being heard when I talk to political representatives and are feeling crushed by society, the only thing I can do is swing
set
back.
fire to some tyres or organise a beer hall push or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. So it's pretty worrying. And I think the Doge thing, like the reason that it's popular with people is because they go, well, that's my taxpayer money. And I want someone to understand that I can't even feed myself, let alone putting my money towards these causes that sound ridiculous. So from that point of view, totally understandable, I think, in a way that respects how people feel. And so I know that you have a real interest in population decline, and I think this will be really interesting because you've got more of the, I mean, I don't know if it's good language, like the have-nots versus the haves. Like inequality is increasing, and I know there's that Margaret Thatcher quote that conservatives love to use around the conservatives want everybody to be like up here, but Labor want everyone to be down here and moving towards the centre, but actually you're dragging the people who have ambition down. But I think there's a point at which social cohesion is very poorly served by increasing inequality, and part of government's role, and this is what I believe as a Liberal, is to even out your equality of opportunity. And if we're going to a point where you're just like it's not about equality of outcome, it really is about equality of opportunity. And if that is not set at an appropriate level, then people will start going to more extreme pathways, and
voting
exactly.
for more extreme pathways.
And I heard from a pollster recently, which was super interesting, that he was having a focus group in North Queensland, far North Queensland, and he said to these people, "How do you feel about the teals?" And they're like, "Oh, okay, we actually don't know what the teals are. Who explained to us?" So not necessarily the type of demographic that would be natural teal voters. Like he's explaining that they go into moderate Liberal seats and essentially take over the frustration with perhaps the more conservative elements of the Liberal Party, and they really get on these environmental bandwagons and I mean environmentalism isn't a bandwagon, but they have a focus on integrity and climate, and they're getting elected. And these people in far North Queensland were like, yeah, good on them. They're sticking it to the major parties. Like, that's what we want to see. We support that. So regardless of the ideology, I think there's a sense of wanting to just rally against the status quo, essentially, and have this disruptor mentality, because there's a sense that maybe anything is better than what we've got now, or like you're willing to roll the dice on that stuff, which is kind of problematic, I think.
Yeah, I can really see that. There's a lot of distrust of institutions, the hegemony, and be it billionaires or an EPA or whoever it is. People are just going, hey, I'm missing out. Tear it all down. I'm voting for the disruptors in all of this. And so if you're coming from a political party that's been part of the establishment for a long time, it's something to be, really, really mindful of. So something you're really mindful of,
definitely,
and you're in the progress in the process of making, I suppose, the modern Liberal Party fit for purpose and doing that. And so how are you doing that? How do you deal with that? How do you go out to how do you manage, because the Liberal Party's regarded as a party of lower taxes, less inclined to intervene in the markets, trying to deregulate. Yet to deal with some of these things, you have to do so. You have to do that. So how are you striking the balance? How are you setting forward on that path?
Yeah, well, I think that there will I think, not as a libertarian, but as a Liberal, that there always should be a role for government and legislation and regulation. So it's about recognising that some of the legislation that may have worked for us in the past is not working now. So it's about reviewing the things that needed to be dealt with 10, 20, however many years ago, that actually either require a new way of looking at things, or maybe they don't actually require thought anymore at all, which is good. So you've got this, like say tax, for example, and at a state level, we don't have many levers in terms of tax reform, but it is clear to me that stamp duty is not a good tax, but it clearly provides revenue for the state. And my suggestion is that land tax reform is necessary to actually even out the playing field and allow us to have a better and fairer way to utilise land, which is it's not like capital, it's not like labour, it's a different type of asset class. So we should treat it as such, especially when those tax settings around stamp duty are preventing mobility, which is a real problem. And I actually think it's the worst decision that the Labor government at a state level here has made.
How do you mean it's preventing mobility? What does that mean?
So say you've got a 5-bedroom house and 2 older people who have brought up their kids in that house and now empty nesters, and they've got this beautiful home and it's just got empty bedrooms. And they go, okay, well, we could downsize and it might even be better for us from a lifestyle perspective, but we also don't want to pay, I mean, it's on $1 million property, talking 40 grand of stamp duty. So most downsizers from a 5-bedroom home in Greater Sydney or even across New South Wales are going to be purchasing a property that's certainly more than $1 million, even as a downsizer. But they have no incentive to do that. And in fact, they have barriers that prevent them from making that switch and opening up that house for use. And I was on a committee the other day, the Greater Parklands Trust Committee, and they're talking about how you capture value from a park. Like say you're living next to Centennial Park, and the Greater Parklands Trust does some amazing work to improve the area, and it really increases the value of the properties around that park. It's pretty unfair that a person who bought that property 30 years ago gets the benefit of that when they sell it, and somebody has to also pay stamp duty and the increased price of that property. What would be much fairer is if you have a small annual land tax that people pay in accordance with the benefits and improvements that other taxpayer dollars have made to that area, rather than being singular recipients of the benefit at the sale of the property. And going back to the mobility issue, I can't remember the figure. I actually heard this on the weekend. I mean, it's something like 1 million empty nesters are in places with 3 or more bedrooms in New South Wales that they could leave if there was, I mean, I'm not saying that people have to leave their homes, but you just want to even that up. You just want to even the ability
remove the disincentive
exactly
for people to make that change, not cop a massive kick in the shins.
That's right.
On stamp duty.
Yeah. And obviously first home buyers are the other cohort that are massively struggling. Like it's hard to buy a house in Sydney or an apartment and Greater Sydney and New South Wales. So how do you improve life for them? And that's something that the coalition did under Perrottet, was to offer first home buyers the option of a small optional land tax, or you pay stamp duty if you want to. But the reality is, as a first home buyer, you're probably going to be in that house for 5, maybe 10 years at most. And under that scheme, it would be much better for you financially to just pay that small annual land tax rather than copping that upfront cost, because actually you're going to be spending more on stamp duty throughout your life, given the current rates of house sales. Like usually, I think it's average every 7 years that people buy a new house. Under that scheme, you are much better off paying a small annual land tax rather than copping the fee.
It's a virtuous thing for a government to do, because they're cutting themselves from rivers of gold, because with just property prices going through the roof and the stamp duty accordingly, it's just flooding the government with money. So it's actually a good thing if you've got a government that says, well, hold on, this is a massive disincentive for people to be involved in the market, move around the market, and we're taking a shot here.
Sorry, go on.
No, yeah.
One of the reasons that the budget, isn't worse in New South Wales is because of increased stamp duty collection. I mean, it's like, it is that simple. The government is relying on house prices increasing over the forward estimates.
So I note that you raised that in your inaugural speech. You had some dot points, some good ideas. Like I didn't have any of those in my inaugural. I just had a vibe. It was the vibe. But you've got some other good ideas. You're very much involved in the debate within society and also within, but I'd say both the Liberal Party and the Greens to some extent. That tension between residential amenity, if I could put it, and the heritage elements. and liberalising, loosening up the planning system so that we can build more houses, optimise the infrastructure that we've got. The fight between, I suppose, the YIMBYs, the yes in my backyard, and the NIMBYs. Tell us about that.
I haven't really waded into this too much.
Well, feel free. Now's the time.
I think, clearly we need more houses, no doubt about that. And the regime that we've got at the moment is not delivering that. And unfortunately, Labor's just overseen the worst year in construction approvals for 12 years. So it's the policy settings clearly aren't working. And there are also economic headwinds and labour shortages. I actually,
a massive state-funded infrastructure rollout. We've got the metro.
Mm-hmm.
We've got huge projects. The airport out west.
Yep.
There's some really massive, globally significant infrastructure projects.
Yep.
So that's the Productivity Commission said that's a massive factor.
Definitely. And I actually wrote a piece for the Daily Telegraph a couple of years ago, which called on the government to actually just slow migration. Because if we don't have enough houses now, we're not going to have enough houses with 500,000 more people in New South Wales. And this, I don't like that. I don't like making that argument because I think generally a growing population has been an obvious source of growth for the Australian economy. But and I was very interested to hear John McGowan's take on that as well, about how governments can make a better argument for automating different jobs if you don't have citizens, which was pretty interesting take. But I think if you have too many people and you don't have enough houses, then that's a problem, and houses are not built overnight, clearly. One of the things that I called on the government to do really early on, and they agreed to do it and they haven't yet, and I'm going to ask the minister about this in the next 2 weeks, I hope, that we should do a housing audit, what is actually being utilised and not utilised, because there are different data sets that suggest very different things about dwelling usage. And there's this amazing Transport for New South Wales data set that I dug up. I mean, super nerdy, but I'm going through and I'm making all the calculations, and it suggested that there might be 300,000 to 400,000 empty dwellings in New South Wales.
I bet. I think it's a great idea. Why just why not? Why just have these policies on sort of set and forget? In terms of immigration, I'm pro-immigration, and I think that immigrants a descendant of them have contributed to this society and will continue to do so. But you just don't turn it up to 11 and leave it without looking at what the outcomes are, and especially when it's starting to, I think, undermine part of the social contract we have in our society, that if you work hard, you go to school, work hard, you save up, that you will be able to, afford property and set yourself up for, life. But the audit of properties, again, another thing in your inaugural speech, is a very, very good idea, because why haven't we done it? Why don't we know?
I don't know. I mean, there is an ABS data set that suggests it's more like 30 to 40,000 in New South Wales. So that is based on electricity and water usage. But I'm just skeptical that that is the ultimate data set. If you have a property perhaps that needs to be maintained and you've got a gardener going around every month and they're using water, or you've got an electricity connection to a property and I don't know, maybe you're using it once a year. I'm just skeptical that that is correct, given the data set that I saw from Transport for New South Wales. And if we want more houses, this is a way to look at actually implementing something that would allow us to have possibly hundreds of thousands of more houses without lifting a shovel. So there are also companies, there's one called...
So what do you do about that? Are you proposing that, if you've got you do an audit, but then how do you create an incentive for someone to rent that place out or sell it?
Yeah, well, I think obviously that's the next question. I think it depends where those dwellings are, who owns them, why they're vacant. It's an easy thing to be like, oh, you need a vacancy tax, but I'm not like a subscriber that we should definitely do that. I think it requires probably more nuance, and I know that's been tried down in Melbourne with mixed results. So I think one of those things, I mean, land tax would be a way to actually
Have a
smooth
tier
that
and-
out.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I think there are probably less heavy-handed ways than having a vacancy tax, but you've got to figure out why they're vacant and where they are before you start talking about those things, because a house is an asset and it's been treated as an asset class for a long time. So you've got to smooth that out in some way. You can't just punish people for investing in that overnight, I would say. And also that there are startups that are looking to address this issue. There's a company called Leasely, which is trying to approach people who have empty bedrooms to rent those empty bedrooms out. Like it's not ideal. It's not the Australian dream, but if there are people who need a roof, then it's better than nothing.
Yeah, if you said to someone who was potentially going to be homeless or
Exactly.
a rough sleeper,
Yeah.
and it used to be a real thing. People used to supplement their income. They would they would turn a big home into a boarding house, and they would say, "Yes, you can come and stay here. There's a shared bathroom, and I'll make you bacon and eggs for an extra 10 shillings or something like that." But I mean, I don't think we're going to go back to that. But some people, if the option was if you can live in the leafy North Shore for, $150 a week, or you're, sharing a bedroom with 4 people down in southwest Sydney, there's I think a lot of people would take some from column 8. It's an interesting part of the debate there, where there's been these sacred cows. There's been part of the housing. There's been all these things that these third rails we couldn't touch. One of them is this actually, auditing how much housing there is, who's sitting on it, and the rest. The other one is just a population policy. I was asking the Premier at Budget Estimates, how many people are we going to have here in 10 years? How can we plan for infrastructure, our society, social cohesion, economic development, if we aren't certain of, and because we really can pull the levers on and off. We know pretty much how many children are being born, so it's really about working with the federal government on immigration. Why there's this reluctance? Where do you think, is it because people think that it's a dog whistle for racism or nationalism or some other some other ism?
I think that's probably true. I think that like what you were talking about before in the social contract sense, like that is a John Stuart Mill principle, having that social contract that's not a formal contract between anyone. It's that sense of responsibility that we have to each other, and that we have to the next generation as well, and older generations who are still with us. Like those principles shouldn't be whittled away. Like those principles are kind of fundamental to us having a safe and cohesive society. And if things aren't working, then people should be free to say that they aren't working and be free to talk about those issues without being called racist or being told that they're dog whistling to some sense of aggressive nationalism. But, the idea of patriotism, there's a really good line in Yuval Noah Harari's most recent book, Nexus, where he talks about patriotism isn't about hating anyone else. It's about loving your compatriots. And I think that that's something that we should embrace. Like that is that social contract that if we're not able to look after the people that we care about, and we're not allowed to talk about that as a problem, that's when people do start getting disaffected. And that's when people do start to think, well, the mainstream isn't working and I need to go somewhere else to find my solutions. And that's where people become vulnerable to saying, well, let's just tear the whole thing down.
And they end up taking to the streets. Really good ideas. What else are you putting on the agenda? What else do you think we need to do to deal with the housing issue? Because it's, the cost of living housing issue is just dominating everything, and it's a real key part of what state governments can do. What else do you think we should be doing?
Well, I think it does go to that idea of people having the right opportunities and the sense that that as a nation there's like a future and hope. So the idea of owning a home, the great Australian dream, it feels completely out of reach to most young people. And honestly, like even people in my generation, like I'm 34, I've worked.
You're a young person.
Thanks. I feel that way in Parliament, but I was literally walking down the street at Sydney Uni earlier today and I did not feel like a young person there.
Wait till you get to 55 and then you meet an 18-year-old and you think that they're 8. You just sort of go, oh my God, they're babies.
Oh my God, I think I've already started that. I just can't distinguish the age of people below me. Basically, anybody below probably 25, I'm like, I don't know.
But there's a lot of disillusionment. My son is just going, look, unless I get a dump in terms of a big inheritance or, I go and get a career where I'm pulling $350K a year, even then,
impossible.
like like a couple pulling that sort of money is going, this is, we better not have too many kids.
Yeah, exactly. And I think with that idea of housing, like, okay, you want it to seem possible, but you actually want it to seem like really plausible that someone could actually believe that it is worth them working hard to get there. And I guess this is a broader conversation than housing. Like this is about making sure that our education systems are set up, that our economy is actually set up for jobs of the future, that we aren't just getting to a point where all the jobs that Australia is good at and like the massive service economy is going to be taken out by AI, that there is, I don't know, maybe productivity is not something that is going to win votes from a kind of campaign perspective, but fundamentally productivity is like labor productivity. It's like minus 2.8 at the moment. Like it's shocking. And without an improvement in labour productivity, and there was this great stat that the Federal Productivity Commission put out a couple of years ago, which was that Americans do in 4 days what Australians do in 5 days. So we're behind. And if we don't improve our labour productivity, we won't improve the opportunity to increase living standards, increase wages, improve our dollar, and that will shape our future. And we have, Harvard Economic Complexity Index, we were at 93, but I think now we're in like the early hundreds. We're like just above Yemen. Like our
93rd in the world.
In the world. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. So we're
for the complexity
Burkina Faso beats us for economic complexity in terms of the different types of industry that we have, the terms of trade, the trade export and import relationships that we have with other countries. Like our exports are narrow in their scope, and that's a massive risk for us. And
what are they doing in Burkina Faso? Is that on the west coast of Africa?
Yes.
Wow.
I don't know, but
they're doing a bit.
Literally beating us in economic complexity. And, obviously you don't want to live there, and I'm not saying.
Well, it also makes you, not only is it, it makes you vulnerable if you don't have a diverse, nimble economy. You just see trade tariffs come in.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't really mean that much in terms of trade between Australia and the US unless you're, making aluminium. That's not a huge deal. But it all of a sudden makes us very vulnerable to dumping of Chinese goods that they're looking for other markets, and all of a sudden, having a narrow economic base, all of a sudden becomes a problem.
Basically, like 40% of our exports in New South Wales are to Japan, and it's coal.
It's coal.
And mostly thermal coal. And they've got a net zero target like almost every other country in the world.
And a rapidly diminishing population. And something I keep raising, I keep saying, well, what does that mean for demand? Where is demand going to go if they're decarbonising and disappearing as well? Yeah, and a lot of our agricultural exports as well, going to Japan, Korea. Everyone thinks we export a lot of coal to China. It's almost nothing.
Yeah.
It's all going to Korea, Japan, Vietnam, and the rest. So we really do need to diversify and uplift productivity. What should we do? We sat on an AI inquiry, which was incredibly fascinating. Blew my mind. Really, the power of computing. Processing power that's coming down range and how that's being harnessed. What should we be doing? Because you're spending a lot of time thinking about that, how to make our economy more robust, more diverse.
So, yeah, AI is pretty incredible, and I think it will be like definitional in our time, the way that we bring on AI into our lives, but also has the power to be enormously destructive and like will be able to think for itself pretty soon in ways that we can't imagine, actually. So it's kind of a massive risk for humanity, but it also offers a lot of opportunities for us to live more interesting lives, hopefully less tedious lives, and perhaps more connected lives. So I think that, like, from a specific government perspective, there are lots of things that we should be doing to demonstrate how AI can be used, how it shouldn't be used. Like, we in New South Wales, we've been a leader in assurance frameworks, interestingly enough. So when Victor Dominello was minister, he really personally led this charge, and our chief data scientist, Professor Ian Opperman, who is just this fabulous man, also involved in international standards around AI governance. Like, we just had this incredible talent in New South Wales, and we were able to be world leading in this assurance framework of how government should use data from a privacy perspective, how it should be transparent and accountable, and really like got this idea that data is the key. So that comes with it now, this idea of growth in data centers, for example, and discussions about energy for data centers, and that being a big part of Australia's potential economic growth. And I think some of the biggest state significant developments happening now in New South Wales are data centres. Really?
Yeah.
Ooh, that's good to
I think
know.
there's a couple of them, on the books.
Yeah, right.
They're data centres
Wow.
and coal mines.
Well, I do.
To run coal-fired power stations.
Next to each other.
Next to each other.
Oh, my God.
I think there was a proposal for a data centre up in the Hunter.
Wow.
Just to plug straight in. I think Microsoft are building aren't they building a nuclear reactor for theirs?
And I actually think that that's quite a good idea. Like, I think, sorry, this is kind of a deviation from AI, but I think the idea of individuals, like homes, people having control like of their own little energy system is really, really good. And I think that where there are private sector companies or industries that require heaps of energy, they should be encouraged to start investing in their own power sources. I think that's a pretty interesting idea.
I think to some extent, unless of course you're running diesel generators to run blockchain in Uganda or something like that.
I think let's say clean energy technologies.
Yeah, let's say clean.
Yeah. And that includes nuclear.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that's a super interesting idea, actually. Like, I'm still not sure that small modular reactors actually exist in the world. I don't know. Some people say they do in some universities and some people say, no, it doesn't. Anyway, I think private sector investment in that technology is super interesting and a good idea. But data centers and AI. Yeah.
You were saying that we really need to seize the nettle there.
Yeah. So I think with AI, you've got to have a strong society in place before AI can be either exploited properly or that it takes you over completely. Because we're finding at the moment that our traditional institutions, and again, like the Trust Barometer shows this, the media, universities, government, and also like the judiciary and legal systems in that, they have all been kind of self-correcting mechanisms over time in Western liberal democracies. If they function together well, they each hold each other to account, and you've got a pretty good public discussion that you can trust where where the world is going to a certain extent, and you can trust information from
But
certain
there's pretty strong
sources.
boundaries between them all.
Exactly.
We don't politicise our universities.
Exactly.
Separation
Exactly.
of the judiciary.
Yeah,
But
which is key.
Which is key.
Yeah, that's the key point. And if AI comes into play, you've got this whole like AI algorithms hack our psychology in a way that like humans are literally powerless to guard against. Like, even if you see a deep fake video of someone that you know has passed away, is dead, even if you see that from a political point of view, they're sharing this message, you know that they're dead, and they're saying, vote for this candidate, you literally cannot help but be influenced by that. Like, good or bad, depending on whether you like them or not. But you cannot help thinking, oh yeah, maybe I should, if I like that person, I respected that person when they were alive, that person has said that out of their mouth, and I'm a human being who is used to trusting when I see a face and somebody say something that's a real thing. And we just don't have the tools.
We're hardwired for it.
Yeah.
Facial recognition.
Totally.
We believe it.
So that's a massive, like, misinformation, massive problem. And we don't have the institutional tools at this point to guard against that kind of imposition onto our psyche. So I think, like, making sure that we have strong institutions, and Estonia is actually an amazing example of a government that has done exceptional work where the public, every person has a digital ID. Something like 98% of their government services are delivered digitally.
What is a digital ID? Tell us about that.
So my understanding, and this is, look this up if you're actually really interested in this. My understanding is you've got like a number or a token that is your digital ID that you can use with all government services, and you don't have to give personal information over and over again in potentially risky ways. So your privacy and your data is protected. You also don't have to waste time doing that kind of thing, that it's all there in one location. And I mean, I don't know how they secure data, but like blockchain technology should be able to do that. And that's certainly what we did with Service New South Wales and the digital driver's license here. So the Estonians, they don't necessarily trust government. It's like kind of on par with EU. It's like 40% trusting government. But amazingly, they trust their police force. It's like 70 or 80% trust in police force. And they trust government institutions and the judiciary. So they have managed to embed these digital processes in education, for example, so that children can get individual lesson plans and they can be monitored throughout their learning. They don't have to do just one test at the end of the year. And if they're kind of a nervous test taker, then they fail their lives. They're actually empowered to learn gradually at their own speed, where teachers can say, these test results over, like, maybe they've been doing a test every week for the last 12 weeks. This kid is really struggling in this particular area. We'll go and intervene and say, hey, we need to work on this particular thing and get them back up to scratch. Like, it's just embedding as a really natural part of everyday life that data is a super useful way to overcome our biases, our lack of ability to compute enormous numbers generally, to spot patterns where we don't have that kind of like a visual aid, for example. So yeah, I think like government as part of building the institutions of trust needs to be able to demonstrate how data and AI can be used for good. And
that good is not to reinforce and perpetuate disadvantage and bias, but actually to separate it out and to say, hey, this helps us build complexity and understand different things more acutely.
Yeah,
that's the key thing, and it is the key risk with AI, isn't it?
Yeah,
it could just reinforce what we already know, and then basically send us into a groupthink spiral into the abyss.
I love that you use the word complexity, because I think that's what we risk losing if we use data in the wrong ways and in kind of careless ways. But the beauty of liberal democracies is that they are deeply complex and they have huge webs of information that are not governed by the state, that are actually about communities and about the social contract and
about the individual.
Exactly right. Whereas we're kind of like, with a declining trust in those institutions, we really risk not being able to utilize data effectively to overcome some of the massive problems, or even to make the most of massive opportunities and solutions, like healthcare, for example.
Yeah, health, a massive one.
But unfortunately, the less liberal democracy, so places that have some sort of autocratic regime in them, are actually much better placed to use these mass data systems, because that centralized element of information control is really useful if you're going to process heaps of data and try to understand it. So countries that have that centralized system are better placed probably than liberal democracies at this time to kind of, weaponize or use.
But they're probably
data.
using them not for the betterment of their society.
That's
but probably
what I
more,
would argue.
Yeah, I think so. I think so too.
Yeah.
You look at China. Hello, China. With a social credit
Exactly.
rating.
Yeah.
We process all that data. That's not really about the betterment of the person. It's about controlling them.
Totally. Yeah.
And so there has to be that element, that firewall, which is that this isn't impinging on my freedom.
Yeah. Exactly.
And so that liberty becomes this this key firewall in that. So it's really interesting, because most people you talk to about AI think it's going to be Skynet, and basically that ultimately Elon Musk and his Starlink are going to nuke us. That's what they worry about.
Okay.
Which I'm
I
sort
haven't
of
heard that one, but like, all right.
But like that all of a sudden Starlink becomes self-conscious and takes over the Russian nuclear silos.
Yeah.
That's
which is kind of like,
yeah,
fair enough,
You don't know. It just decides to play some war games for fun because it's bored.
Yeah, it's the iRobot thing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Keep humans safe, and the best way to do that is destroy them all.
Destroy them all.
Yeah.
At one end, the other end, that's the dystopian end, and so that's the element, or just generate some horrendous virus. The other one is, I think that's more a risk, is this massive, unplanned, rapid displacement of our workforce without us knowing where we're going.
Mm-hmm.
Like, who's changing? How are they changing? When are they changing? That's the big question in terms of AI, because it's coming. This, like, with automation, with the utility, but we've been through this before. Like we like there was a suggestion just with the internet, with MYOB, that all of a sudden the finance sector would disappear, but people became financial planners. So we've been through a process like this before. But how big do you think the challenge is?
Well, one thing I definitely think we should be looking at is payroll tax collection. Like, if everybody's employing AI agents instead of humans, that's going to significantly decrease our payroll tax opportunities potentially. And I think actually we should probably just get rid of payroll tax altogether, because it's a massive disincentive, and particularly at a point where we want to incentivize people to actually employ humans as part of those processes if those humans are contributing. So payroll tax is a big one. In terms of like displacement and other jobs, this is possibly a bit grim, but one of my friends who is pretty senior at OpenAI answered my question. I asked him this like a year ago. I was like, as a legislator, what should I be thinking about in the age of AI? How should I be contributing to Parliament about this? And he was like, yeah, just make sure you're thinking about a good social welfare system. I was like, oh, okay, that's pretty stark. And
is it though? What if we end up like that society just becomes about recreation?
Yeah.
What we do for
utopia.
fun. Yeah, like a brave new world.
Yeah.
Like maybe not have
going.
just get the SOMA going.
You're already
and
doing that.
We'll just have like volleyball and holidays.
Yeah.
And we just become a I don't know, just a service economy.
A recreational society.
Yeah, a recreational society. I mean, what's wrong with that?
Yeah, I think
if the robots are doing all the work, if they're
Yeah.
out there doing all the hard things, and it's not this sort of underclass of, of humans,
Yeah.
slaves, then, what's wrong with that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily think there's anything wrong with it. I guess you've got the opportunity for choice. Like you've got a choice in how you live your life and what you want to contribute to. I'm not sure that it's very likely. Like I think the relationship between AI and humans will kind of be the more interesting thing there, because I think people like to work and contribute and build things together, basically, whether that's communities or an actual like a thing, like a whatever.
Well, it's a key indicator metric of of well-being and longevity is connection and purpose.
Totally. You get back to Maslow always.
Yeah, that's right. So if all of a sudden your purpose is just to hang out and, mix margaritas and lie in the hammock, it gets boring.
Yeah, that's what I would suggest as well. But like, I mean, maybe this is too much of like a noble savage kind of thing, but like Indigenous Australians lived here for 65,000 or more years, and they had a pretty like stable lifestyle for that time. And I find that pretty fascinating. Like when you think about the tens of thousands of years that Australians were living here, doing their thing and like managing the landscape and living off the land and understanding the environment really like in a really close way. And out in the world, you've got civilizations rising and falling, like mass casualty events, and it's like starvation and wars and religion and all that stuff.
Plague and all the rest of it.
Indeed, yeah, exactly. Like people living in close quarters with their own excrement running down the street in front of them. Like that doesn't sound all that civilized. But, there are ways of living that obviously are sustainable and are kind of spiritually satisfactory as well. And I think that that is a super interesting part of Australian Indigenous culture that we can really tap into, this idea of like being part of something bigger. And like, I think religion is an institution that various religions, I would say most religions, are decreasing in their interest and kind of struggling to pick that up. Maybe there's a bit of a change that's happening at the moment. I don't know. But the general trend, I would suggest, is that you've got a downward trend of religious observance and wanting to be associated with a religious institution in particular. But people feel a sense of like spirituality, which is perhaps this idea that you're connected to something bigger and you're part of the world and part of the universe. And maybe there's something in like reaching to that state of being or state of connection where you are a part of something bigger. Like you're not, like liberalism isn't that you're on your own as an individual. It's that you're an individual in a part of a bigger world. And I think that's, I've been reading a little bit of Spinoza recently, which is pretty dense, but in ethics, he's basically a determinist. He calls himself a pantheist, which is not that you have lots of gods, but it's that everything is God. And
I'm with you.
Yeah, it's like this idea has been around for a long time, but I like the idea that maybe becomes a bit more mainstream with the idea of like.
Well, you can at least do it for a couple of days of the week.
Yeah,
you can go and be a plumber.
Yeah.
And then you can go out and stand in the wilderness and connect to the universe. And I'm an Epicurean.
Nice.
I know you're a Stoic.
I do love Stoicism.
You're a Stoic. I'm an Epicurean. I'm into just not having pain, gardening, and eating well, veggies, grow your own, DIY. Not so much interested in just surviving pain. I'd rather avoid it.
Yeah.
I'm a coward.
I think
I'm conflict averse.
I think reducing suffering is probably a good thing. That's probably something that we try to do most days in Parliament, even though we subject ourselves.
We do.
Yeah.
But look, we're off in the weeds there with the Spinoza.
Sorry. Oh
I know. How did we go from AI to Spinoza? But AI, great. Like, I'm not afraid, like, because of AI, because ultimately we can turn the power off. I think that ultimately
There are too many power sources.
well, like, like in Terminator 2, like there's always a way. There's ultimately some power source that you can go to and fritz it with. And we've always felt this way, about, be it, electricity or
Fire, maybe.
fire.
Let's go back. Let's go right
I bet
back.
you that. Well, that's exactly right. Fire or steam engines or whatever it is. People will say it'll be we'll all be ruined. But maybe this is an existential threat, but one we really have to turn our attention to because it is amongst us.
Yeah.
Where it's happening now. Hello YouTube. You're using it. It's on our phones. It's in our lives. Government departments are using it. It's really about building an understanding about what the steps we are going to take and what that means to bring people with us, isn't it?
Yeah. Although I do think AI is different to other technologies. Like, its ability to act autonomously is like fundamentally different to any other technology. And I know you say take the power off as a way to stop it, but I don't think that that's possible. I just think that there are too many power sources in the world. Like, we're not going to turn civilization's power off, I don't think. And if we do, like, the irony is, okay, we're going to take ourselves back to the literal dark ages. And I think like that ability for autonomy and thinking about things that we don't think about, like AI can comprehend things and make up things that humans don't think about and won't come up with ourselves. So that, coupled with like quantum computing is kind of like, I don't know if I'm exactly scared, but I think it requires a different level of focus to actually say, what are the guardrails? And is there a point at which you actually say, like, some actors are so malicious that you have to actually stop them from interacting with AI in some way, because there is an ability for individuals to control AI in a way that there isn't in terms of like like a nuclear missile that has to go through state-based processes. So
yeah, and the idea with AI is that you have to have this this gigantic supercomputer to run AI. That ain't necessarily so.
no.
That's what Professor Toby Walsh was saying. That ultimately relatively small computers with relatively small processing power are going to be utilizing this in ways we really can't see. One of the key ones is like our whole society runs on encryption.
Mm-hmm.
And it's encrypted data just keeping in front of the program that's trying to decipher it.
Yeah.
And it's just, a couple of steps in front.
Yep.
And if that process how we transfer money, how we tell stories to each other, how we send, sensitive information, that all really comes undone really quickly. And that's a huge issue in terms of security, personal freedom, and the rest. So big issues, really big issues. Now, one of the other big issues, I'm going to jump around a bit, but one of the other big issues that you're involved in is the party heart. You were saying that you really like to see you're the assistant minister for
Arts, digital government, the 24-hour economy, and innovation.
That's exactly right. 24-hour economy. What are we going to do in this city, this state, to really keep things going at 3:00 in the morning?
I think that we need more non-alcohol based activity. So that's like, like a cafe.
You're in
basically.
Australia. You're like, come on.
Yeah,
You're
I know. But it's true. I think
it's so true.
Like, you can't get a coffee after 3 p.m. Like, it's not right. like forget 3 a.m.
Yeah.
There was even a story in the Herald over the weekend about a guy who's going to all the different hospitals. Did you read that? And he's got his little truck with the cafe set up in the back so that he can serve nurses and doctors and other medical professionals that are starting their job at like 2 a.m. in the morning and fuel them up. Like that sort of innovation is really helpful, I think. But we face a massive challenge where you've got people who are turning 18 now who went through COVID, who are not super familiar necessarily with being out and about. We are competing against phones and digital communities. So I think it's actually going back to that human thing of how do we allow people to feel that sense of connection? Like are we apes? Is that we're a type of monkey? We need social.
I certainly am.
Is it
I don't know about you,
is
but
that
like,
the
look
family that we're apes? Yeah.
we're simians. We are the great apes.
So we need that like physical connection, and the idea that we can't create a good society without that physical connection is like super troubling for me, at least. Like, I don't know if you went clubbing in Sydney whenever, you might still do it. I sometimes do. But
Club 77 for sure.
yes,
I have. And it's great. Connection's what it's all about.
Yeah, totally. And you meet people from all parts of Greater Sydney that you would never come across otherwise. Like, you find the similarities in your humanity. Like, it feels kind of lofty in some ways, but it makes you a better citizen, I think. The more people that you meet, the more difference you encounter and realize that actually it's fine. You can all enjoy something similar. There are heaps of studies about like, going to people who go to festivals are happier, and that act of dancing together with music and that rhythm, it actually kind of locks people into this similar psychological wave, whatever. I don't know the science, but it's good stuff. It's food for the soul. And
yeah, my wife just got back from WOMAD.
Cool.
Yeah, and she came back. She was absolutely blissed out, had a great time. She saw PJ Harvey and all these amazing acts. And yeah, it just really reset her, invigorated her, really inspirational. She met great people, went down there with some people she didn't really know, and yeah, had an absolutely fantastic time.
And maybe you offer cheap or free fares for people to come in, for young people to come into the city, for example, or go to certain places where they can, they don't have to spend so much money. I think that's that's one of the big barriers, is like being on your phone, not having enough money, and probably not feeling like you have enough time because you're working so hard to make money to just try to live in Greater Sydney. So
yeah, and the big fest, like the legalised cannabis party, we've been setting up at the some of the big metal fest, rock fest, like Knot Fest and Good Things, but it's a lot of money.
Yeah,
if you're a student, you've got a part-time job, you've got to save up.
Totally.
It's hundreds and hundreds of dollars. It's a big impost, and they don't miss you. Like it's $10 for a mid-strength beer and all the rest of it. So we've been flying the flag there and giving everyone else another option there, haven't we, Pete?
I was listening to Killing in the Name Of on the way here.
Really?
God, it's a good song.
It is a great song.
God.
What does it say? Fuck you, I won't do what you tell me.
Yep,
there you go. That's a bit like that's liberalism.
Yeah.
That's freedom.
That's possibly been my political career a little bit. Like, keep Sydney open. That was when.
That's right. Keep Sydney open was a really big thing, because there was all this pushback. But the interesting in terms of we had some really draconian laws came in about lockouts and where you could drink and how you could drink and all the rest. It had a massive chilling effect. I remember living in Sydney, and I used to, for like after Parliament, just to stretch the legs, I would walk to Bondi where I lived.
Wow.
And I'd walk down there in the evenings, and there was no music. There was like nothing.
Yep.
Occasionally you'd go like Oxford Street was dead. Occasionally, if you wandered up William Street, there might be like a comedy club going or a little jazz bar, but there was just it was dead as a tack. And I thought if we were in Barcelona or London or whatever, it'd just be absolutely bustling. So your idea is we need more things that are like different to alcohol. Why did you say that?
I think that there is a shift away from alcohol as part of the kind of recreational activities that we see younger people in particular engaging in. And again, like you need them to be cheap, free, really accessible. And I think like that's where the European spirit is so good. Like it's so natural to have a reasonably cheap meal at a restaurant and you've got musicians out the front or you've got buskers all across the street. Like it's not.
You don't have
not,
to have a license.
Exactly.
And like, you know, here's your
yeah.
permit and this is the spot you can stand in.
Yeah.
And you've got your, you know, you've got your third party, you know, insurance premiums paid up and the whole thing.
Which is a massive problem at the moment because although the government have introduced new legislation around opening up trading hours for venues, they actually can't access proper insurance. And I believe this is actually a data problem. One of the reasons is because the insurance companies are using data sets for calculating risk based on cities like London and New York. Oh. And people on King Street in Newtown are like, well, we're not that. Like you don't need to charge us enormous amounts of money to be open to 2 or 3 a.m. because actually we don't have like a crime wave happening after midnight. So that's like, that is a problem that we need to overcome. And I don't know, like I'm not sure if government needs to get involved in something like that, but certainly if negotiations need to happen to the point where like businesses can't utilize the new legislation and regulations, like that is a problem. So yeah, that is a specific problem.
That is a specific problem. Like I think Enmore's been a spectacular success.
That was done under the coalition.
Yeah, no. Like all credit to the coalition for that because it's absolutely hustling and bustling. There's micro bars. It's very safe. It's in the interests of the all these establishments, these bars and pubs and clubs to make sure that their patrons are safe. There's a real vibrancy. You've seen all of these restaurants and the rest. My bugbear though is traffic, and if you look at if you want to create a space for people to recreate, then you've got to get rid of cars. And my hope is with autonomous driving, with a move away from everyone owning cars, having to park cars, drive cars, that more space in these areas. And it doesn't like just one lane of traffic means that there's a space for alfresco dining. Look at George Street now. It's just fantastic. There's alfresco dining. People are mixing, moving around. It can be, you know, it's easy for the police to patrol and make sure everyone's safe. Ambos can get in. You're not seeing people walk in front of cars and all the rest of it. I think that's a really key thing. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think I love the idea that no one has to park when there are autonomous vehicles. Like parking spots don't need to exist. That is super cool. And hopefully they'll all be EVs and there won't be actually street noise in the same way, like the exhaust and fumes and everything. It'll be such a benign addition, a car rolling past, because it's not going to have the noise, it's not going to have the exhaust, and it doesn't have to stop anywhere apart from dropping or picking people up. So I think the City of Sydney have done a pretty good job in getting their what do they call them, like the pathways extended onto roads. So getting rid of parking in certain areas, although I know businesses don't love it in all the areas because they say, well, our customers need to be able to stop somewhere. So, I mean, you know, there is that to balance, but I think extending that footpath area to actually allow people to sit outside, like the use of rooftops is also really amazing in Sydney, which hasn't always been utilised to the best of its ability, but we have this amazing weather here, and why wouldn't you want to be outside? So, yeah, I do think the City of Sydney have done a pretty good job, and they are currently running a series of, I think they do it every summer, maybe it's even called the Summer Series, where they block off main streets in a certain suburb, and each suburb gets one every summer, and it's like Glebe gets one, Potts Point gets one, Newtown gets one, and I think Pyrmont as well. where you literally block off the street. You
You used, to have,
advertise.
you used to have Newtown. It was called the Newtown Street Party,
Nice.
and everyone would just turn up with their lounges and sit on South King Street. Everyone would just carry their lounge out and put them there. But then the riot squad came in and bashed everyone, and they got us into trouble, arrested us. But that was such a blast. Sitting around, there was a bit of alcohol, I've got to say. What's your view? I've got to ask you on one of my big arguments for cannabis legalisation is that it gives us an opportunity to create, one. It's up to individuals to determine, like individual adults, to determine what they do, how they do it in a responsible way. That cannabis has been used for a long time, can be done so responsibly with very little or no harm. And other jurisdictions are doing it. But one of the great benefits from it is it gives us another one of these options for people to take up if they want to go out and do something different. In Spain, Germany, United States, there's a lot of venues that are alcohol-free. People go in, they can consume cannabis in various forms. Either they can smoke flower, they can vape, but increasingly popular and the biggest growth is in edibles. So you're not inhaling anything. It's like there's titration. You know the dose you're getting. It's increasingly sophisticated in terms of your own physiology and what you take to give you either a sedative effect or a stimulant effect, and it's incredibly popular. What's your view on that? Because I think it would be an interesting enlivening addendum to nightlife that would bring visitors into the city and people in from the suburbs if they could go to a pub or a club or a rooftop where they could sit around, consume cannabis, have a nice meal, listen to some jazz or whatever it is, or some hip hop or whatever, and just chill out. What do you reckon?
So I think, is this like the social clubs?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, because this is something that came up during the inquiry, right?
Yeah.
That was the first that I had learned about them. So I think the main concern I would have around like public consumption of cannabis is around like people being exposed to cannabis who didn't want to inhale it or whatever. So like edibles kind of overcome that largely. And I think that is where my personal tension lies between like legalizing and public consumption and not. So if like we've gone to great lengths to stop people as much as possible from taking up smoking cigarettes, knowing that it's pretty bad for you, and the government put on taxes and all that kind of thing. And that's been pretty useful, although now we've got the tobacco wars, which is not good. Obviously.
Prohibition.
Yeah.
What's going on?
Well,
fire bombings,
yeah.
the Comancheros and
quite bad. Yeah,
it's quite bad. Who'd
making a lot of
it?
money. Yeah, I know.
Prohibition
But it's not prohibition, right? It's just like high tax.
Yeah. But,
so
yeah.
sure, yeah. It's reached its limit, right? I think that is one of the jobs of government, is to figure out what the public will tolerate from things like a tax regime and cigarettes.
And what people are going to do anyway.
That's right.
They're really, adult human beings have been doing it.
Yeah, and if you can't control imports of cigarettes, like you're probably not going to be able to control all that well, like cannabis being grown wherever it wants to grow. So
Right
yeah,
here.
I think I think that like public smoking is probably the biggest issue that I would have, that you wouldn't want basically people to be smoking cannabis on the streets.
We don't have public drinking. So like we don't
That's true,
have
but-
laissez-faire with public drinking.
We sort of do.
We sort of
do. As much as John Ruddock wanted
I know.
to make it a free-for-all, We do have places where people can drink in public, but the difference is obviously that you don't get drunk from somebody else drinking a glass of wine next to you.
Yeah.
So I think that is the thing for me. Like, you don't want people to be getting high when they don't want to. And I actually think that that's a big risk, because you walk around Sydney streets at the moment and there are people smoking cannabis. Like, and it's, they might have a medical certificate or whatever, but I don't think that it's right that people should be subjected to that effect if they don't want it to be.
That's fair enough. I think it's highly unlikely that you'd get high from passive smoke. You'd have to be pretty, you'd have to probably be in a duchy to do that.
Is that really true?
Yeah, it's like it'd be like a homeopathic amount. Yeah, but if you were, like locked in a panel van with, 3 people who were, smoking big joints, you'd definitely get high for sure. But if you were just sitting at a beer garden while people were around you, yeah, probably not. But although David Boone, the cricketer, tells a story about playing cricket for Australia in Kingston in Jamaica, and there was so many people smoking joints that he said he was facing the West Indies, who were coming in and bowling at him at 150 miles an hour, and he was just all super relaxed and chilled, knocked out a really casual 100. And yeah, never looked back. But what about it? What about a facility where you had a rooftop garden and it's a big sign that says,
this is what you're getting.
This is what you're getting,
Yeah.
which is what you get at a pub.
Yeah.
People in here are drinking rum. Be warmed. They're going to be loud.
Yeah.
They're going to be raucous. All the rest. Whereas the people, if you're chilling out in a beautiful garden with lounges and some nice music and food and all the rest of it. What harm is in that? Like, isn't that just freedom?
Probably.
Oh, good. Good. That's good. I'm glad.
But also, like, I think the other part of it, which is important because we know how damaging alcohol is, and it can be good for some social settings, but also it's pretty destructive, really closely associated with domestic violence and crime in general. And
yeah. Like violent crime.
Yeah. Exactly. So not always good for human relations. And like highly addictive. So what are your views on addiction and cannabis use?
My views are that, there is cannabis use disorder. There's no doubt about it. That there's certainly just rule one is young people, under 15, children, anyone under 15 using cannabis shouldn't be. It's very, very problematic. And even anyone, with a developing brain older than that, it's not good. You shouldn't be doing it unless you're an adult. There's no doubt about it. While you've got a developing brain, people young people do, but they should be mindful of that it can be, it can develop into cannabis use disorder, and you can certainly develop a dependency on it, like any other substance. But we're much better off legalizing it so that we can have a conversation about what that looks like. What are the signs that you've tipped over into dependency? What are the signs that's affecting you, physically, psychologically, financially, in terms of your relationships? What does dependency look like? And what does misuse look like? And also, there's, it's a very, very diverse product. You can have cannabis, that has absolutely no psychoactive impact on it, like that's THC, or you could have 30% THC flower or oils that are even a higher concentrate that have a very strong effect. Some of the gummies you can have, they can steal your soul. You can
just a little gummy bear.
Just a little gummy bear, little
really
orange gummy bear this big, and you can be lying there going, why am I backflipping through time and space?
Yeah.
No one warned me. But so you really do need to have education and labeling so people know what they're getting, and so they're not getting their cannabis, because millions of Australians use cannabis every year. They're not getting it from someone who's growing it the wrong way, potentially mixing it with other things, and not telling them, hey, you know, there's risks with everything we do. So I just think it's about harm reduction and developing what we call responsible adult use. And, you know, and I think that is a better way to manage things, you know, allow people the education, the opportunity to be educated about what it looks like, and for governments to then be able to regulate and benefit in terms of, you know, a bit more vibrancy, diversity in our society.
So 2 things, like, okay, going to AI and I guess any regulatory change, but this will be quite a shift in society. Like, I was proposing through our AI inquiry that we get an AI commissioner, that we have an R&D component and capability in government, that we are trying to become experts essentially in this field as much as possible, and also draw on experts to ensure that government has the appropriate knowledge and whatever that it needs to regulate properly and to move forward. Does New South Wales need some sort of cannabis commissioner? Like?
Well, yeah, it's a good point, and I'd like to congratulate you being on the first person to flip.
Done no
you have you've done it. I noticed. Everyone out there has noticed. Jacqui Munro. She's on her way to the top. She's cleverly flipped, and so now I'm in the spotlight. Yes, of course. Yeah, that's a reasonable proposition. If you're going to regulate it, you're going to have a market. Most of the states in the United States have literally a cannabis commission and a cannabis commissioner going, like, how much cannabis are we using? Where it's coming from? How are we using it? Why are we using it? Is it good? Is it being impactful on society? Who's benefiting from it? I mean, in New York State, there's been a real focus on developing the industry with a social justice lens, that is, the people that were the losers in the war on drugs, so people from African American background, lower socioeconomic status, people that had been, you know, locked up for using cannabis, were the ones that were able to benefit in terms of licensing, being able to set up shops and all the rest. Now they've had some teething problems there, and there's a lot we can learn from the social sort of laboratories that are already running around the world, but yeah, certainly having a regulator is a good idea. And I know you didn't get your AI commissioner up in terms of the recommendations, but I'm sure you'll keep fighting for it until you get it done.
Can I just ask one more thing on that?
You can.
So the counter to legalizing, or part of the counter to legalizing cannabis, is that, well, you've legalized alcohol and it actually gives kids a pathway to use that substance earlier. It becomes more normalized in society, and you might say, well, it's illegal for young kids, but they're definitely going to do it anyway. And if there's more available and you can walk into a store, you can get someone to buy it for you, whatever, that it like use will naturally increase amongst young people, and that will have a potentially devastating effect for them, that they have to deal with not just alcohol being legal and that being a potential problem, but also cannabis, that some people might switch one for the other if they're an adult or whatever, but at a young age, you're just trying to do everything and you're not thinking about the consequences to your brain or whatever. How do you think about that?
Well, I think about it a lot, and it's the key question. And I think the answer is that with alcohol, what we learnt is you don't advertise it. You don't advertise it to kids. You don't have, you stop Meta from posting ads, you make it illegal, even though they already do. But you just have to clamp down. Well, you to the best of your ability, you restrict advertising of it, like we have with tobacco. You don't have so you don't have advertising of it, and you have education really about what it is. And what they've starting to see in the United States is that with cannabis, because it's become legal, and it's lost its mystique, it's lost its rebelliousness. It's like
It's not that cool.
It's not that cool, and it certainly for a lot of people is you're not going to like. If you've consumed cannabis, you're not really going to feel like doing improv theatre. You know, it doesn't make you as extroverted as some people. It's different. Most people, improv theatre or, you know, public speaking, it's low down on the list. You're more likely to chill. And so it's really becomes like, you know, an older person's like pain medication, something people are dealing with. What I call a relaxant, rather than a adult recreational use. It's not really like that because it's very different. I think people take alcohol as a medicine, but it's not a great medicine. I think it's problematic. You know, it creates literally inflammation. I think in your mood and your physiology and the rest. Cannabis is very different. It is. It's a relaxant. So physiologically, it relaxes you. It's a vascularizer, so it relaxes your blood cells, your blood vessels. You relax, which is a good sort of recreation, relax, but it's also a good medication. That's one of the reasons that it's good for stress, pain, inflammation, all anxiety, all of these things. So I think it would very quickly become something young people did. There's no doubt about it. I'm not saying they're not going to do it, but they're going to say, look, it's not high vibe. You know, I'm not going to be high key doing this. This is a low key thing. And people will be able to have a conversation with people who are doing the wrong thing, like we are with alcohol, you know. Sort of. But the thing
there's still a lot of stigma about like alcoholism and not enough work done to link alcohol with domestic violence, for example.
Yes, but with alcohol, you've got this industry that's been around for thousands of years, unregulated, and we're really trying to clamp it down. And a lot more people in society use alcohol. With cannabis, you're looking at about 10 to 15% of people.
Which would obviously increase if it was legalized, though.
No, this is the key thing. In California, in all the places where they've legalized, because like there's like cannabis use, prohibition isn't stopping people using cannabis.
Sure.
Because
it's stopping some people from using cannabis.
Not many though. Not many. Only a tiny fraction.
Did you read that Weatherburn paper? There's a Don Weatherburn paper he put out a couple of years ago, which was about would you change your behavior if cannabis was legalized? And it was like 1 million people
would try it.
Yeah, would try it. I think it was. Ooh.
Yeah, but trying's different to like being a regular user. Like 40% of Australians try cannabis. So like everyone, like most people try cannabis.
Yeah.
I'm not going to ask you if you've tried cannabis.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask you later if you will try cannabis. We've got one here. We've got the bong packed, ready to go.
No medical prescriptions, so it's not something that I could possibly engage in.
I know I might have broken the law then, so we'll just check with the lawyers, Pete. But most people everyone who wants to try it in Australia tries it. The vast majority of people say, hey, that was okay, not for me, wigged me out. You know, I went all white and had to go home early, blah, blah, blah. Some people just go, that was great, made me, you know, thought I made the Ren and Stimpy much funnier, really enjoyed the nachos, relaxed, and chilled out. And so I don't think it's going to increase the numbers of people who are regular users. I think but what it would do is mean that there's a much more mature conversation about what responsible use is.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think Rick and Morty would be the more modern reference point.
I know, Rick and Morty, but if you're at home, kids, check out Ren and Stimpy, because that is the truly trippy one. Is Rick and Morty's good, but I think that's the key thing, that it creates a conversation about what responsible use is. The genie's out of the bottle with alcohol, because it's such a massive industry. But what we're seeing in the United States is where they have legalized it, there's actually a decline in youth rates. There isn't a spike in general use, and a reduction in alcohol consumption as well, because people go, there's something else I can do, out there. So, so that's our arguments we'll continue to make, and I hope that the Liberal Party starts making too, because it's about freedom too, personal choice. If I'm not blowing it in other people's faces, who's it hurting? That's a question.
Good point.
Okay, very
Noted.
good.
I'll take
Very
that
good.
as a comment.
Now, let's talk about politics, because that's what we do.
Mm-hmm.
The federal election is coming up.
Yeah.
And we've seen politics, like internationally really washing around. We've seen centre-left government come in the UK, and then whatever Trump is coming. It's just like every morning you've got to wake up and find out what Donald Trump thought this morning at lunchtime this afternoon, and you're just hoping that there's not a nuclear war or some disaster. But we're heading into a federal election. What's your take on the federal election, on politics in Australia at the moment? Do you think Peter Dutton can win the election?
I think it's possible, but it's probably not the most likely outcome at this stage. I mean, he still has to win, 19 seats or something. It's pretty huge. So I think it is possible. And we've heard from a couple of people that there are some key swing groups, key swing voters. There are professional women and also actually Chinese voters who are pretty key in a lot of the really highly marginal seats, some of them in Sydney, like Bennelong. So the Liberal Party really lost the Chinese community at the last election because of the drums of war comments, and it was seen as much too aggressive against and not even necessarily from a security defense perspective, but even from an economic perspective. Like, if there are people here who are Australian citizens, but they've got Chinese heritage, they might have, a business or whatever, some interest that remains with China that they obviously want to see some stability in relationship with. So that's a really interesting cohort that will be quite decisive, I think, in the upcoming election. And professional women as well, where you've got people who, maybe they want to have a family, they're not sure if they can afford it. Maybe they've started having a family and they want a job and to care part-time for their kids, but they don't feel like they have the flexibility and the choice. And a highly educated group of people as well, professional women as a class. And I think that we still need to do a lot more to actually get those people on board with a Liberal message. And I think those two factors will be pretty decisive for whether Dutton wins or not.
Do you think Dutton's the guy? It sounds to me like that latter cohort is clearly people who would be attracted to or interested, if they're not already voting for teals. So, is Dutton the person to really win them back? How do you think the Liberal Party can win back teal seats?
Yeah, I do think that. I think it will take some time. So much of it is an image problem. In the New South Wales Parliament, we are one woman away, although now that Port Macquarie has shifted, we're 3, I guess, women away from being at gender parity in the New South Wales Liberal Party in Parliament. So we actually have an amazing set of representatives who are diverse. In New South Wales, the Liberals are the only party that have representatives under the age of, I think, 36. And there are about 6 of us, and they're all Liberals. And that message has still not permeated through the community, that we're actually quite a young and representative group of MPs. Obviously, the federal party has all the other states to look at as well. But from a teal perspective, it surely has to come back to policy. I think teals have a lifespan. I don't know how long that they can remain convincing about their idea that they're not a political party. I think that that's just it's a silly idea to imagine that they're not a political party. I think that they are going to, if they are the balance of power, I mean, it seems like no matter which way it falls, we're almost certain to have a minority government at a federal level. Most of the teals have already said that they will demand negotiation on every single bill that comes before Parliament. And it would be so unwieldy and so unbelievably, in my view, kind of anti-democratic, actually, to hold a party with the vast majority of seats and many more than the teals to ransom, and the people who voted for them to ransom, because of just a couple of people who kind of got lucky in terms of their timing. And
it's interesting you say that, because when Windsor and Oakshott and Catter were in there, I don't think they did that.
No, and this has actually been reported that
they just sort of said, look, well, there's some things we want to talk about.
Yeah.
You know, Tony Windsor said, look, there's some things up in, you know, Tamworth that need seeing to, and Rob Oakshott and Bob Catter said, whatever Bob Catter said.
Yeah.
I don't think he was in on something about crocodiles and biodiesel. And proclivity. Sexual proclivity. I love Bob Catter.
1,000 blossoms bloom.
1,000 flowers bloom. I don't know what happened behind the Charters Tower Cinema. I went there a couple of times, he said, which was pretty funny. Old Bob Catter. And if you're watching, come on down into the weeds. Love you to have you on. But they basically said, look, there's some things that they were very transactional. There's some things that we need to get done, but we're not going to hold you to ransom on everything all the time.
So they've basically, from what I've seen publicly reported, they've basically said to the teals, don't do what we did. We wouldn't do it again. Like, we want to hold the government to ransom every single time because it's the only way that we keep power. So just from like a kind of realpolitik point of view, if you've got that power and you don't want to give it up, in that case, you actually don't have to. And I think that that's really a dangerous precedent to set. And I think it will stall the good functioning and good order of Parliament. And I mean, that's not how you operate, I don't think. I don't know how you operate with the government, but you can shed some light on that.
I'm much more transactional. But let's let the viewers in on a secret. A lot of the time, the major parties vote together.
That's true. But I think that's fine. I don't think that that's a problem.
No. But it's not like it's like the Liberals say no all the time and Labor says no all the time.
It's like 85%.
85% of the time they say, yeah, just knock this little bit off the edge here and we'll get it done.
That's right.
Because next time round, these things come and go.
Which I think, we talk about compulsory voting a lot, I think, and we should. It's amazing. And it does generally get us closer to the center of policy decision making. And I think that's important.
It's interesting you say that, because the people that would benefit the most from non-compulsory voting are the hard left and the hard right.
Of course. Yeah. I mean,
you just knock out the centre.
Yeah, very few people march down the street with a sign saying like, I'm reasonable.
Yeah.
It's you got to get the blood boiling.
I'm not sure. Tell me what you think.
Yeah, exactly. And you see this in front, like across Europe and in Israel as well. You have these massive, super unwieldy multi-party systems and these coalitions that are made up of all these random parties. And you're like this, and it is dysfunctional, actually.
The European Parliament.
Yeah, that's true too. But in France, you have this really interesting situation, which I also think is super problematic, is that you have En Marche with Macron. He became this kind of centrist leader who was known for being like sitting on the fence essentially, and being just towing this middle line, which is good for a little while, but what it does is forces the left and the right to go out further. And then when Macron goes and that cult of personality leaves, you've just got this hollowed out centre, and all you're left with is the extremes on the left and the right, and that is no good. So
The same thing in Germany you see with the AfD.
yeah, Auf für Deutschland.
Auf für Deutschland, thank
Yeah.
you. And you still have the, what are they called? Die Link. The
left.
The left, which are like
Capital
big,
T, capital F, capital
like
D,
the
capital-
Linker,
Yeah.
and like just all the old communists from East Germany,
Yeah.
like doing quite still around, still pulling 15%, and the sort of whatever they are, the are they fascists? I'm not sure. AfD are pulling 20% of the vote.
Yeah.
And sort of saying some pretty out there things.
Part of the reason that left party, I don't know anything about them, but just taking what you said.
Because the coalition there in the government was like the Social Democrats and the Greens and the Freedom Party, I think it was.
Because in Germany, the Greens aren't like socialist, communist. The Greens are
centre left.
Well, they're kind of capitalists who care for the environment. So the
Foreign Minister, Annelies Baerbock, is a real hawk.
Yeah,
She's their foreign minister.
Exactly.
She's the one saying spend 5% of GDP on Panzer tanks and send them to Ukraine, and came out here actually interesting. Came out, toured Australia. Like, didn't meet with any of the Greens out here. They've actually been writing her nasty letters, the Greens.
Really?
Saying, like, why are you such a fascist?
Wow.
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
I mean, personally, I find that kind of politics quite appealing. This like right-wing environmentalist, like that makes sense to me. You still want a strong economy, otherwise you can't do anything. I do think that for the Greens to survive, I mean, they've really strayed, particularly at a federal level, into these pretty radical policies that I mean, personally, I don't think make really much sense at all. And they've associated themselves with like the CFMEU, and I don't think that that's appealing to the Australian public.
I don't think so. Speaking of right-wing environmentalists, like, if you, had to save, they were in a lifeboat, Peter Dutton or Matt Keane.
Oh. You can't.
I know.
Can't.
That's so much. But Matt Keane.
They'll row each other. They'll find a way to work together, and they each take an oar.
I know that's mean, but
that's my political service. I would not intervene. I would be laissez-faire about the situation and let them figure out their.
Well,
future.
I'm backing Matt because he's been a pretty effective operator as a treasurer.
He's amazing.
And set the state on the pathway, the roadmap to renewable, net zero, renewable energy. Stared down a lot of naysayers in the coalition and in society generally.
Yeah.
But you worked for him, didn't you?
I haven't worked for
him. Didn't you work for him?
No,
Oh, no, you worked for Gladys when she was
I worked
treasurer.
for Gladys.
Yeah,
Yeah,
sorry.
But I love Matt dearly, and I just think he is a phenomenal politician. And when you say he stared down people, that's true. But he also built coalitions around the idea, and he spoke about John Barilaro in his valedictory speech, and said like John was courageous in his ability to bring the Nationals on board with the res. Like the renewable energy zones and the roadmap, it had the support of the Greens, of Labor, of the Liberals, and of the Nationals. Like that is pretty remarkable. And that is fundamentally what you get when you have a skilled politician who can work with everybody and give people what they want and find the way to negotiate and to compromise so that everybody is on board. I mean, that is the dream. I don't think Matt gets enough credit for just how skillful that work was. And a lot of it was done during COVID.
Yeah, it was. Well, I think he will. It's one of those things that the people will look back and say, "Well, look, we've reached net zero. Where did we set sail from?" And he, really showed a lot of leadership down there. He's running the Climate Change Authority, isn't he?
He is.
So respected across the aisle, the political spectrum.
Although I'm sure that was a pretty strong political move by Albo to appoint that to that position.
I know, it annoyed the shit out of the coalition. There's no doubt about it. But he's the man for the job. How do you think I'll give you a free shot, just a free swing, bowl one up, a lolly. How's the Minns government going? What's going on? Are they doing a good job?
Yeah.
How do you think they're going, and why would you be better?
Ooh. So have you played the SCG, the Pollies versus Press cricket game?
Yeah, I did. I played a couple of years ago, got out for 2. Matt Wordsworth bowled me up a really nasty one, got me out for 2. Couple of run outs. Yeah, but I played. It was heaps of fun. I played with Mike Baird and Matt Keane and a couple of others there.
Nice.
A real privilege and honour to go in the Australian cricket, the Australian Test teams, change rooms, and hallowed ground. Amazing.
So amazing. I went there 2 years ago, and my first bowl on the SCG, I think I got Max Madison out from the SMH. And
I'm not surprised.
He wrote a really nasty story about me in the Australia when I was running to get into the upper house, calling me a devil worshipper.
Really?
Literally. So yeah, just talking about the bowling situation. That was my that's what comes to mind. I just can't help it. So yeah, bowled one up for me. And then I think I got James O'Doherty out on my second bowl. It was amazing.
Amazing.
You know who was impressed? Mark Latham.
Really?
Yes.
There you go. Well, he was a bit awful about female cricketers recently, and I said to him, he said female cricketers will never compete with male cricketers, and I said, why? I said, he said, they'll never be physically as strong. And I said, what about a really tricky spin bowler, or like a really amazing bats person?
Yeah.
You never know. And he was just, being Mark Latham.
So yeah, Minns government. Not good. I would say C- be my rating.
Right.
I
That's
think
still a pass though, C.
Is it?
I think it was. I know it was. C minus was
Okay.
49%.
Yeah,
That was what I was aiming for.
P's get degrees. That is a common phrase. But yeah, no, definitely not passing. Whatever the fail, F for fail. Is that
all right, D. Okay.
Dunce. Yeah, I mean, as I said, I think the worst decision that they've made so far is getting rid of that optional land tax for first home buyers. Like, economists and policymakers for decades, even the Ken Henry Review recommended that we have a broad-based land tax, and Labor get on board. They make it an election issue. I don't think they won the election on it, so I don't actually think they had this massive mandate to change this policy, but their language around it is it's a forever tax on your family home, and you can't walk back from that. That was so bad. That was so bad, and it really put that policy back possibly decades. We'll see. So I think that's bad. I think that all this absolute mess of union wage negotiations has been horrific for the taxpayer, and it's been just this tidal wave after tidal wave of really difficult negotiations where basically everybody's unhappy. Things aren't getting done. The trains stopped working. The psychiatrists, that's in the Fair Work Commission today. Psychiatrists are walking off the job. How does a government not realise that psychiatrists have all the power in that situation? They can literally get paid 3 times as much elsewhere or coming back as locum staff. How do you not negotiate with someone on those terms effectively? And you see people.
So you just play hardball?
Well, at some point people go, I'll just leave. I don't need to be here. I feel a passion and a love for this profession, but there's only so much that people can take. So yeah, that stuff's so bad. The RTBU,
What about the cops and the teachers though? They got a pretty hefty
they
rise,
did.
and
but the teachers have to negotiate again this year. Like the cops got a big rise. No, I mean, if you're a cop, you're not happy about that. And I'm not saying that public servants shouldn't get a pay rise. That's not what it's about. And also, just as a quick aside, the 2.5% cap that the coalition had for about a decade was actually larger than CPI. So the reason that there weren't strikes for a decade is because the public service were getting a wage increase that was commensurate to CPI or above. And then COVID hits quite bad for everyone, and inflation's all over the place. And
they also had a coalition government with like a 700-seat majority too, and knew that like they weren't getting any, it didn't matter what they did.
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, a general strike was not on the cards.
Yeah, I don't know how unions operate really, but like the Labor Party is the political arm of the union movement, not the other way around. So when we're talking about who runs who, unions make up, I think they've got like 11% of the Australian population as members at the moment. It is so small, and they literally run the federal and state governments around the country. That's an enormous amount of leverage and power. And the uncapped wage increases, by our calculations, it's something like $16 billion that hasn't been accounted for anywhere in the budget. Like, that is why everything else is getting cut. There's no new infrastructure projects. Things are being put on the back burner. I've been super critical about, why aren't we improving our trade relations with other countries? Like, if we want to grow our economy, we actually need to be finding ways to drive investment, to increase our export capacity. So that is like been a massive fail. Innovation has been a massive fail. And again, this is where we can actually improve our productivity. Like technology, science and technology and innovation are the keys to unlocking productivity, whether it's use of AI in businesses, and maybe we have tax breaks for businesses who utilize certain AI tools, and whatever, they can, they get some money back. Or, we used vouchers quite successfully during COVID as a way to stimulate certain parts of the economy and shift behavior. So yeah, innovation. It's just like, it is super grim that is not a massive focus of this government, and they have taken like a scythe to the.
I've got to say, I share some of your frustration when it comes to medicinal cannabis. And I know people might like the medicinal cannabis market globally is heading towards $1 trillion. Like it's already worth hundreds of billions of dollars. The world's best producer of medicinal cannabis, one of the world's best producers, is ANTE, Australian Natural Therapies Group. We're based here in New South Wales and also Queensland. They export all their product to Germany, basically.
The Nats should be getting on this.
Yeah, they absolutely should. The Nats started the medicinal cannabis industry on the basis of Lucy Haslam's work back in the day, but we really haven't seized the opportunity for a massive industry it's incredibly labor intensive, and it's got unskilled all the way through to super skilled manufacturing, really high end, pharmaceutical products that could be employing tens of thousands of people. And I keep going to the government and saying, hey, what about this thing, especially in areas where you're transitioning out of, say, native forest logging potentially, or coal mining. There's this transition. You can locate these facilities like regionally, remotely, and that's fantastic. But yeah, it's been hard to get them to see the opportunities there for a gigantic domestic and export industry, I've got to say.
So is ANT valuable overseas because there is like a high production quality here, or?
Yeah.
Because I remember during the inquiry, there were problems, like local producers here were having problems competing with imports because the regulation on imports was much, much looser.
Oh,
than
totally
anything.
loose. Yeah. it's called GMP. So we have there's a global there's global standards. Australia meets those. So like a lot of markets that demand high quality, like the EU and the standards, they need to be buying product from jurisdictions where they know what it says on the label, that it's GMP. What's it called, Pete? Government manufacturing process. Good manufacturing process, GMP. And so that's accords with a certain, international standard, and Australia can do that. And we've also got the Therapeutic Goods Administration, like overseeing, and the Office of Drug Control. But we're not really seizing the opportunity to grow an industry which is already in Australia worth more than $1 billion a year, and globally is going to be absolutely gigantic within a generation. So, I share your frustration there.
Well, in New South Wales, like the startup ecosystem is worth something like $80 billion in New South Wales already. Like, it's huge. And we have some of the world's leading technologies in a range of industries, whether it's space. Like, we've got Space Machines Company is down the road in Botany, with UTS setting up a facility for them, which is amazing. And they've got satellites in space. They're like the NRMA of space. So they send up satellites to fix other satellites.
Really?
And
wow.
it's so cool. And their first one that got sent up included, like, they were full startup mode. They're building this satellite, right? And it's probably, I don't know, like maybe 1.5 by like 2 or 3 meters. It's small. And they're trying to find pieces to make it all work. And they're going to Bunnings, and they're buying bits from Bunnings and like modifying them in the lab and sticking them on. And so
Bunnings in orbit.
There is a piece of Bunnings in orbit. So like that, it's this amazing ingenuity, and you've
Just
got
cable
like,
ties. There's nothing you can't do with those things.
Yeah, it's cable ties. What is it? WD-40 and gaffer tape. Like that'll keep it together. So we have this enormous opportunity for really smart people to make their mark on the world. And we know, I mean, it's kind of an interesting time from like investment in defense perspective for innovation. Like, we know innovation explodes when defense investment increases, and those technologies generally filter down, and space has been a massive generator of technology that ends up filtering down to us. And, now we can use Google Maps or whatever. So there is so much opportunity to harness what we already specialize in, like quantum computing, space technology, and also that we're an attractive place for smart people to come, buy a nice house, send their kids to a good school, create jobs for other people who are going through university and want to be a part of that change. Like, the growth potential is just so huge. And I guess like the cannabis industry and like innovation, science and technology is probably different in the way that they generate value, but they both rely on improving productivity to be competitive, I suppose, globally. So that's where we need to get back to in terms of our economic conversation.
Well, fantastic, Jacqui Munro. Oh, yes, I cannot forget the first ever gift on Into the Weeds. Let's do the unwrapping. To Jeremy. I'm not going to read that out because the algorithm will destroy me if I say that. But thank you very much.
No
Let's have a look.
From one to another.
From one to another. Let's have a look at what we've got here. It even comes with this, very nicely done. What is it? It's a socket set. No? What is it? It is. Oh, no fucking way. Yes. Johnny, the original meme. DJ like a mad cunt. Awesome. Thank you so much. Check it out. There's Johnny. Hold on. Where is he? There he is. The original meme. That's fantastic. Well, I'm trying to get John on the program.
Oh, it would be so good.
Oh, so good.
So
I'm trying to
good.
give him the right of reply against Mark Latham. Look at that one.
I was writing Facebook posts, this is so embarrassing, in high school praising John Howard's economic policies.
Well, look, he was a very astute, nimble politician. He had a very long and successful career. And I'm sure that you are going to as well, Jacqui. You're a smart cookie. You've got some great ideas. The Liberal Party's in good hands if you're there feeding them into them. So it's been a real honour and privilege to meet you, to be working with you. And so thank you very much for the mug, a mug for a mug. And thank you so much
Thank you.
for being the first Liberal into the weeds.
Not the last.
Not the last.
Thank you so much for having me, Jeremy.
No
It's been a
worries.
lot of fun.
Thank you.
Thanks.